Hello, everybody, and we are finally live. Sorry to keep everybody waiting. Complicated business, but nevertheless, we are here. We are back, and I promised a live stream today, so we're doing a live stream today. And on top of this, we have a lot to talk about because there has been a lot in the news. The greatest witch hunt in recent American history continues yet again. Donald Trump sued for defamation and battery in a civil court case, not a criminal court case, a civil court case in New York, basically admits that he's innocent and then goes out there and he has to pay $5 million to some woman that there's little evidence that they've ever met before. But she claims that Trump raped her back in the day. And that claim was proven false in the civil court, but still they tried to get Trump on some lower charge and they did succeed. It's $5 million. It's not like it's a whole lot of money to the billionaire former president, but still a ridiculous miscarriage of justice yet again at the hands of a New York court where Donald Trump is the target. Trump is the target. We're going to talk about that. We're going to be talking about Tucker Carlson. Tucker Carlson is moving on up, or sort of. He's actually got his new show. Apparently, it's going to be on Twitter somehow, and he'll be able to reach a very wide audience there. So it's going to be interesting to see how that pans out. It's a little bit of an unorthodox thing for sure. Maybe he'll have the re-uploads on YouTube or Rumble or wherever. Maybe he'll do that. But still, it's interesting to see the fact that Tucker Carlson is not going to be stopped by Fox News. They're not going to bring him down. He's going to still be out there doing his thing, going out there and probably reaching a wide audience as well. Maybe not as wide or as unique as the audience he had at Fox News, but still he'll be able to reach a fairly wide audience. I think his first video back was kind of like a 5-minute video or so on Twitter, kind of teasing a potential show. And that got millions more views than his shows typically get. Now, obviously, there are things like watch time that need to be taken into account, but we'll be discussing that and why that's still a good thing. Also, Mitch McConnell, does he want to lose the Senate again, even with the most favorable map in history? The answer is yes. However, Democrats apparently want to lose the Senate as well, given some of their recruits, and we're going to be talking more about that later on in the stream. But first, we are going to get into this. And if you guys want to send super chats, we'll probably get to them at around the 40-minute mark, maybe a little bit sooner. But feel free to send those in as well throughout the stream, and I will get to them when we get through the first large part of the show here. So Donald Trump, he came down the escalator in 2015 in New York City at Trump Tower. And ever since then, the political establishments of both parties have worked against him at every single turn. They've weaponized every aspect of our bureaucracy, our government, our criminal justice system against him. And now they've got him on everything. They raided his house over something that was already known. The government knew where the documents were. It was an ongoing legal battle. They raided his house last year. And now this year, they indicted him on something totally bogus, past the statute of limitations. And then for another case, they actually legally changed the statute of limitations in the state of New York for this E. Jean Carroll case where she claims Trump sexually assaulted her. And the jury, that's a secret jury in liberal New York, they find Trump innocent for most of the claims, but they still get him on some unknown technicality. And then when it comes down to defamation, even though Donald Trump went out there and he didn't do anything wrong, he basically said, I didn't do this. I wouldn't do this. I've never seen this woman in my life. And they're basically going out there and they're saying, listen, she says you sexually assaulted her. His response is no. And he was like, she's not my type. Like, that was what he went to. It just shows how Trump is a real human being when it all comes down to it. Even though he has been a part of that same system in the past that wants to bring him down, he's just too real. He went out there and he pushed the right buttons in 2016, did it throughout his presidency quite a bit, and he's doing it right now in 2024, which is why they're trying to stop him. And the only thing the primary opponents can really say is that, oh, they just want to investigate him so it helps him in a primary because he's weaker than DeSantis or whoever. And we call those people the QAnon people because they come up with the most outlandish theories that keep getting proven wrong day in and day out. But this stream is not really going to be a 2024 focus stream. We'll cover it a little bit. We'll cover the Trump Twitter A-logs, or just critics who all they do is attack Trump for no reason. And many of them do back his opponent or potential primary opponent, Ron DeSantis. We'll cover that. But I'm not going to do the whole 2024 thing. Obviously, I'm sure the super chats will get into it. We'll cover whatever you guys have to say, questions about that. But we're going to be talking more and more about this other stuff in the meantime. But you look at this and it's like, okay, they clearly want to get the guy on something else because they think it's going to make him look bad. But the people are tired of it. They're not necessarily tired of Donald Trump, but they're tired of all of these nonsensical investigations that are going into this guy that turn up nothing. The Russia investigation, that was supposed to be the big thing. That was their insurance policy that they paid for, that the Clinton campaign paid for back in 2016. You saw those text messages between the Lisa Page text with the other guy, I forgot his name, but or Strzok, Peter Strzok, whatever their names were, and you look into them, they were basically laying out a potential insurance policy. Okay, well, if Donald Trump does go out there and win the election against Hillary, against all odds, they're going to need an insurance policy. And that was what you saw in the news for the first 2 years. The Russian investigation, that was just, it's again, blue and nonsense, because they always want to say, oh, the people that come up with the most outlandish, untrue claims, which they'll then label as conspiracy theories, are all on the right. They're the Q people or whatever. But no, the answer is not that. The people coming up with the most outlandish theories that are constantly being promoted by the media, promoted by the establishment, is the establishment itself coming up with all these wacky, outlandish theories that are actually very harmful and have actually negatively impacted political discourse, unlike whatever boogeyman that they want to throw out there that is universally laughed at or looked down upon or whatever. And that's pretty much for that. But it's like they've always tried to get them on something. And then this is their new thing. And it keeps getting more ridiculous and more ridiculous. We thought the whole Stormy Daniels thing was the most ridiculous thing. And then they have to go back to that to indict him on something that was not even a criminally viable indictment. There's been far more egregious campaign finance violations by politicians over the same time frame that have not been looked at or have gone into civil litigation where they've had to pay a fine like they had to do for the Steele dossier. But it's like, even so, looking into it, let's say everything they're saying is technically true. It's not even a criminal case and it's already been past the statute of limitations. And they had to change the statute of limitations in New York just for this case. Just for this case, they changed the statute of limitations. And now Trump has to pay $5 million in damage to a woman he essentially claims he never met. You know, seeing pictures of her, it was like, oh, is that like my ex-wife or something? Like, who is this woman? What is her relevancy? Because there really is none. And it's like, just, this is true. It's like, lady, you raped me. Guy, no, I did not. Lady, yes, you did. Guy, when? Lady, I don't remember. Guy, lady, right? And this is true. This is the same woman that claimed on a CNN interview that she says that most people perceive rape as something sexy. So she's clearly a deranged, demented individual. And you could look into it and you could read between the lines, but basically all it has to do with is just the persecution of Donald Trump politically. And people can call it baggage, but it's not just Donald Trump. This is going to happen to pretty much every single person that the establishment sees as any remote threat to their order. And for the people that are going to sit there, and I will say this about 2024, if you are talking about the rise of Ron DeSantis, or maybe Ron will have less baggage, they will manufacture baggage against him if they actually perceive him to be a viable threat against Biden, which I don't believe that they do, or you would see quite more of that be established right now. But either way, it's not working. Like, this just bounces off Trump. Anything they throw at Trump from this point forward bounces off. And all he has to gain are disaffected Biden supporters from 2020 who are fed up with gas prices or whatever. And all Trump needs to do is run a more competent campaign this time around, ballot harvest, etc. That would arguably be enough. So they are kind of desperate. They're trying to do everything that they possibly can do to go out there and subvert Donald Trump and his electoral chances, not just in the primary, but also the general election. I don't believe this moves the needle whatsoever. I just don't. We've seen too much of this stuff over the years. And maybe the first initial things like the Access Hollywood tape did negatively affect him a little bit, even though it wasn't by nearly as much as people made it out to be. It's like this kind of stuff, if anything, like it's like get over yourself, and it just energizes the base more so than it energizes the opposition, because the opposition has already seen it all. They're energized to a certain extent, but I mean, past what certain point can these people stay energized? And that goes for pretty much everybody involved in politics, but it's like ridiculous. So the woman sues Trump to prove it. And this kind of just, this is the tweet, the Twitter thread here that's on the screen. And then Trump basically says, you know, this is crazy. And then the jury agrees that Trump did not, you know, sexually assault this woman, but they say like he abused her in some other way that's not said, because he was defaming her by fighting back and fighting for himself. And then he had to pay her $5 million. And it's totally nonsense. It's utterly ridiculous. And this goes for like any man out there. Like this can happen to you, because you do have this bias in the justice system against men as well. And you have a lot of women that will go out there and levy these false allegations of sexual assault at these people, and they will ruin their lives. We've seen this time and time again. And it's not just going to be able to happen to Trump. It happens to quite a few people. And yes, there are some legitimate cases where this type of stuff happens. Of course, we know that, but this is not one of those cases. And there's plenty of cases where you do have these false claims levied and thrown at guys who don't have $5 million per se. And as a result, their lives get ruined and they become unemployable, all over lies. And it's, you know, the woman goes in the spotlight, this woman in particular. She's going on CNN saying all these crazy things and going on MSNBC, having book deals. That's all this is about. And then she makes $5 million on top of it. It's ridiculous. There's no real benchmark here. If it was such a problem at the time, it likely, you know, you go to the police. That's what you do. And there was no going to the police. And yes, some people in some cases may be afraid to go to the police or whatever. But still, why did it take this long when Trump was a public figure? And when did it take this long to the point where everything came out right after a tape was released that was taken out of context, where Trump said some sexually suggestive things that was honestly purposely held by the network and by the Clinton campaign and released as a tactical move by the Clinton campaign to try and bring down Trump and affect his image among a lot of these suburban female voters, even though a lot of them wouldn't have voted for him anyways. So that's what it comes down to. This is a big problem, and it extends far beyond Donald Trump. You have a lot of people out there who are getting accused of sexual assault from women that they've never even been in the same room with. And it's a major problem. And it needs to end now. If there's no concrete evidence of it, it should be thrown out. That's the way it should go. And that there's nothing else to it. This whole believe evidence. I mean, we've been over this before. We saw it with the whole Kavanaugh thing. It's an entire witch hunt. That's all it is. And this is another case of it. And pretty much every case, there's been plenty of these cases thrown at Trump that have been thrown out because there have been eyewitness testimony saying that they were there in the same room or the same airplane or the same whatever with Trump and this, you know, whatever given woman. And they claim that it's false. They do. So it's nonsense. I don't know how many times, I thought we were over this like in 2017, 2018, the fact that Donald Trump is not some sort of rapist or whatever. And yes, the same thing can happen to the other side. Remember the whole Biden saga with the whole Tara Reade thing, which again, that hasn't been talked about a lot either. And that was at the time a serious claim. And there's more merit to that claim than any of Trump's claims, by the way. That woman was a Democrat. She said it during the primary. She kind of went away for the general. She said she hates Trump. It wasn't even used by the Trump campaign, maybe because they thought that it would just be, you know, Biden would go out there and just say the same thing about Trump because of these allegations or whatever. I don't know if that allegation is serious, but there's more merit to it, especially because we know Biden is Biden. He's very handsy. He's very handsy around kids. You look at all of those videos. He sniffs their hair. He does a bunch of weird stuff and acts in a way that no normal person would be able to act like that and get away with it, nor should they be able to act like that and get away with it. But Biden, it's okay. Oh, silly Uncle Joe, you could do whatever you want. And that's that. And Trump is being sued because of this, and he got successfully sued. But it's clearly not an egregious thing, or Trump's not a rapist, or he would be probably in prison, especially with that justice system. But we know that that's not true. And I know we're not going to fully get into the 2024 stuff, but you look at the people on the right who are like these new never Trumpers, the neo never Trumpers. A lot of them are the diehard DeSantis people. They decided to go out there and side with this woman. This guy, whose profile picture looks AI generated, is probably one of the most egregious disimps on Twitter. He goes out there and says, the verdict is in. He's liable. The jury found he was a sexual abuser. Hashtag Trump is a sex offender. People on the right who oppose Trump in the primary aren't necessarily doing so because they like both. And not, I'm saying like in the influencer sphere, not your average voter. But there are people out there who are going after Trump, calling him a sex offender. These are not the people who like both and think Trump is less eluctable or whatever. These are people that are actively wanting to cause harm, cause division within the Republican Party. Trump's going to get the nomination. A lot of them want Trump to lose the general. The Republican establishment wants Biden to win a second term if Donald Trump is the nominee. Make no mistake about it. That's why a lot of these people are going out there and they are hiring these influencer teams to sow division on the online right. They are essentially having these super PACs sit in the shadows and wait, sending people to Iowa to canvass for Ron DeSantis and all these other people, even though they haven't even been in the race. It's absolutely ridiculous. And now DeSantis's numbers are falling. They're cratering to the teens in these recent polls. Now they're saying Mike Pence might jump in. And that was a new report that came out today. And I'm sure we'll talk about that in the super chats. But some of these other people are going out there saying he literally mistook her for his ex-wife in an old photo. Oops. So apparently he like claimed that, but I don't know how that's relevant to the case, because if he like saw that, it didn't like jump out at him that that was a picture of some woman that he knew that he knowingly, sexually assaulted or whatever. He looked like a picture of whatever his ex-wife looks like now, which is probably nothing like how she looked like, 20, 30 years ago when she was actually with Donald Trump. But it's also true. It's like, you think Donald Trump can't get women? Like, Donald Trump is like the original top G, Chad, whatever you want to call it. I mean, this guy is a billionaire celebrity. He's had access to all the top models that would throw themselves at him. He's married several of them. And it's like, do they really think that Donald Trump needs to do that in order to get some sort of like sexual gratification? Like, of course not. He easily does not. But apparently they think that they manufacture that. It's ridiculous. And we know that. And yes, there are prominent people that will abuse people for their gratification. However, there's really no concrete evidence that Donald Trump has done that. And there has not been any evidence of that until this slew of accusers, many of which have close ties to the Democrat Party, came out when Donald Trump was 70 years old and was running for president and had the Republican nomination, was the biggest threat to Hillary Clinton, who was at the time the darling of the political establishment. So that's what it comes down to. These claims are bogus. The jury admits they're bogus and then still says Trump has to pay a certain fine for some unknown reason. Ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. And it's not going to stop there, folks. It's not going to stop there. And there may be some more cases thrown at Trump over the next few months. And the more cases they throw at him, the less it's going to stick. This sticks less than the last case, which stuck less than the last case, which, I mean, you go back in the day and you look at some of the stuff that they've thrown at him like 2-3 years ago, there was probably more grounds for some of that stuff than there were for this stuff. And there was really not a lot of grounds for that stuff. Like the whole Trump University thing, that was even overblown. He settled the case, whatever, he moved on, and they moved on to this con job. And then you have a new con job and they get weaker and weaker. They become more pathetic and more pathetic. It's like, give it a rest, but they're not going to, because Trump is still the biggest threat to the political establishment. If he wasn't, they'd be throwing this at Ron DeSantis. If DeSantis really was the non-establishment candidate, which is one of the latest copes by his paid divisive influencer team. But still, speaking of people who buck the establishment and get fired over nothing, Tucker Carlson is starting his new show. He's starting his new show on Twitter, apparently, in which he is going to go out there. And I presume he's going to like put videos up on Twitter. There's no like specific streaming platform that Twitter has the same way that like even Instagram has or like YouTube has. But still, he's going to be doing his own show. We're not entirely sure how long the segments are going to be. I don't believe it even says so in this article. But still, he is teaming up with Elon Musk. He's going to probably bring some more people to Twitter, which is a good thing. And he's going to be doing his show. I don't really think it's going to be a live show. Like I think that they used to have like the Periscope things on Twitter where you could live stream to Twitter. I don't really see a whole lot of that anymore. I don't even know if that's a feature, but still, he's likely going to be posting the videos there, probably posting them to other places, unless there's like an exclusivity contract that he has with Twitter. But still, Twitter is a free speech platform now, or so they say. Technically, it's not perfect, I know, but in the past like 7-8 months, there have been some serious strides that have been made at Twitter to make it a more free speech style platform. They put on a lot of, old banned users. Not every single old user that got banned has been reinstated, but a lot of people have. People like Donald Trump himself. And there's plenty of other people that were his supporters that got banned for whatever reason. Their accounts are back now on the app and they're doing better than ever. And the algorithm seems better. You don't get banned for the most incessant things, the most like, I guess you would say that just the most like, mundane type of stuff, the stuff that was, prominent in discourse 10, 15 years ago. If you criticize transgenderism in any way, shape, or form on Twitter, you would get banned. They ban you for pronouns or misgendering or whatever. I think that has sort of subsided a bit. They've changed the terms of service. So it's not perfect. Like I said, it's not like an authentic platform. Anybody could say whatever they want as long as it's legal, but it's still in a much better position than all other major social media. It's in a better position than Twitter was before. And I think that ever since they've had people pay for it, they've been making more money, which is really interesting. And their user traffic hasn't dipped. And that's kind of the benefit of having a monopoly that you can sort of mold into like something solid, but you're not going to get that all the time. So what I will say is, yeah, it does seem as if it's not perfect, but still Tucker Carlson being on the platform, he's going to have more leeway to say all kinds of things. He's going to be able to talk about his, own personal beliefs a little bit more. He'll be able to talk about, I don't know, even some conspiracies a little bit more that Fox would not let him talk about. He'll talk about a lot of different things. He'll have on a lot of more interesting guests. Maybe he'll have like Alex Jones on a show or something, and they could be talking about some wacky stuff, and it could be great content. That kind of thing you can have on a free speech platform to a certain extent. Yeah, technically Alex Jones banned from Twitter, we know still, but I mean, if he has him on his show or whatever, because apparently there was a picture of them hanging out not too long ago that got released pretty recently. And I don't think that would have gone over well if Tucker was still at Fox. But it's like, yeah, you can bring on some more interesting, more dissident guests and have more important conversations and push the Overton window that way, which is something that they're not necessarily fond of. So regardless of however you want to chalk it up, the fact that he's still doing a show is a good thing. I'm sure he's going to have other ventures in mind. Maybe he'll be wanting to run for political office in 2028. Maybe Tucker 2028 will actually become a thing. Who knows? Maybe he'll be an informal advisor to the Trump campaign. There were those reports that they were not on best terms, but they've been very close over the past year. So whatever divide they had there does seem mended. I'd love for Tucker to be an advisor to Trump. Maybe he could be his chief of staff or something like that, because he definitely would be somebody who would keep him in check. In fact, he was the one critiquing Trump's presidency, and Fox didn't like it because he was critiquing it from the right, and Kushner didn't like it because Tucker was attacking Kushner, and Trump was like in the middle. He didn't know what to do. And it's like now Kushner's out of the way. If you have Tucker in your corner, it's a hell of a lot better than having a lot of people that could be in your corner for sure. And if Tucker was Trump's lead advisor throughout his presidency and was in the White House at all times instead of some of these other people, yeah, Trump would have easily, even given all the stuff that took place in 2020, the riots, COVID, whatever, would have easily been able to go out there and win. The only thing that might be a question mark is what or was Tucker's initial reaction to the pandemic, where he was in favor of lockdowns, whatever, but he quickly, backtracked by the time summer came around. So did plenty of Republicans on that issue. I mean, that's neither here nor there. But still, Tucker would do a great job in some role in the White House. He should be able to have his own show. He should be able to go out there, do whatever he wants to do. And I think it'll be a good thing to a certain extent. So that's it for the Tucker Carlson segment. We're going to get into the Senate stuff. I'm going to talk about this in tomorrow's video, maybe more in depth, but it's just so ridiculous that I think we need to cover it now. We'll start off with the Dems because we'll start off with what the Democrats have been talking about, because Colin Allred is a disaster. Ted Cruz is probably the most vulnerable Republican senator for re-election. And even then, he's not really that vulnerable. He's not. Like, he'll probably win. The worst case is he wins by just like a 2 to 3 points again, which I don't think is going to happen. And they put up this guy who now comes out and says, yeah, we need to go and take more guns, essentially, and that the Second Amendment was the founders would not have written it today, and says all these things about the Second Amendment. It's like, are you dumb? You're in Texas. Like, you are in the state of Texas, very pro-gun state. Yeah, it's moved left a little bit, but still the Dems in Texas continuously have just dropped the ball on their candidates and their messaging, and they don't seem to be willing to change that anytime soon, to the point where I think that they just probably are banking on demographic changes and trends to carry them over. But still, the more they act like this, the less that does seem to be happening. And they've even been losing some of the Hispanic voters there in the metros, but to a much larger extent in South Texas. And as a result, they are not going to be able to win it back as easily if things continue. Obviously, the suburbs are where the population is. It's where, the big trends happen. But even then, if you look at the trend, not the shift, but the trend, which is compared to the national environment, Harris County, which is where Houston is, did not move left in 2020 to the Democrats' demise. Dallas County, who knows what's going to happen there? They've lost population since 2020 as well, even though a lot of that was due to COVID. And it's like, well, they will gain in some of these northern Dallas suburbs. It may not be enough to flip the state in 2024, 2028, maybe 2032. And who knows what's going to happen by then? We have competent leadership. Maybe we could save Texas. Maybe we could get the border under wraps and keep that in check to the point where we're not going to have this unfettered mass illegal immigration, try to lower the amount of legal immigration as well in the process. That's definitely going to buy some more time for the Republican Party in the state of Texas. But putting up this guy who underperformed Beto in 2018, underperformed Biden in 2020, underperformed Biden again in 2022, it's a disaster, a total disaster for them in Texas. So they botched Texas. Now they want to botch Florida, which again, they really have no shot in Florida. So I'm not saying that they really have a chance whatsoever. But, presidential year, Rick Scott is meh, and he usually runs his elections very close. 2014 red wave year, he barely beat a barely alive Charlie Crist before he became the corpse of Charlie Crist. So now the Democrats are going out there, and who do they want to run for Florida? Do they want to run Stephanie Murphy? Do they want to run somebody who may be able to appeal to the electorate a little bit more than their past nominees? No, they want to run Dwayne Wade, who is not really the biggest fan of Florida. For those who don't know who Dwayne Wade is, he was a shooting guard for the Miami Heat for many years, won a couple titles there. He's not particularly well-liked in Orlando. He's not particularly well-liked there in the other basketball city in Florida. which again, Miami just won Metro. And he's not well liked in general. He doesn't really like Florida. He's mainly a Chicago guy. And he's got all sorts of woke problems with his family. He's been outspoken in favor of his child. I don't even know what the birth sex is, but they are transgender, and he's been a vocal defender of that. Big BLM guy, very, provocative on social media with that. And he has family members that I think have gang ties as well. So their star recruit is somebody who would arguably be like Herschel Walker, but worse, somebody who's only known for being an athlete that's sort of also like a carpetbagger. And then you have all these other personal problems, and they're even a worse fit for Florida than Herschel Walker was for Georgia. Brutal. Their other recruit is Grant Hill. So they're only wanting to recruit NBA players. Grant Hill played for the Magic for a few years back in the day, back in the early 2000s. But really, his career was known for being the strongest when he played for the Detroit Pistons, where he carried that Pistons team in the teal era. Now, Grant Hill, unlike Dwayne Wade, actually does have an IQ above 100. That much I can say. But at the end of the day, he's barely lived in Florida. He has a residence in Florida, I think, but he has like a lot of residences. And I'm not entirely sure that he really is going to bring very much to the table. He's a better recruit than Dwayne Wade. But even then, he's going to go out there and lose to Rick Scott, who's weak in and of himself by 10 points or so. So this is what Democrats are doing. They are actively trying to go out there, and they looked at what the Republicans did in 2022, and they said, hey, I'm going to do this on steroids with all these flippable seats, or the most flippable seats they have with, Republican incumbents that are relatively strong. And in Missouri, they want to run a Bernie bro against Josh Hawley. It's like whatever they're doing there is not working whatsoever. It's an easy win for Republicans. If they're doing this in these seats, what are they going to do in the other seats? Probably weak stuff as well. And they're going to be running horrible campaigns. And Republicans seem to be having better recruits than last time. You put in charge Steve Daines, who's a lot better than Rick Scott at managing those races. But what does Mitch McConnell go out there and say? He says he sees 4 states as key. What are his priorities? Ohio, it's understandable. Montana, okay, you need that. West Virginia should be an easy win, regardless whoever the nominee is. And pretty much all of those states, except if you put up Dolan in Ohio and you put up Zinke in Montana. And then what's the 4th? Arizona, which is a 3-way race you should easily have a shot at. Wisconsin, which, put up the right nominee. You could knock off Baldwin. She's not like that invincible. Or Nevada, where you continuously are making gains in. It's Pennsylvania, where the Democrats have their strongest incumbent, besides maybe Amy Klobuchar, where you have Bob Casey Jr. A lot of that popularity is attributed to his name, but a lot of voters do vote based on vibes, and he probably is going to perform better than Biden. If Trump wins Pennsylvania by like 2, there's a good chance Casey also wins it by 2, because he's going to outperform. And he says that this is because he wants to nominate another carpetbagger, not Rich McCormick. That's a good McCormick, but David McCormick, who is awful on a wide variety of fronts. So much so to the point where he couldn't even clear a third of the primary vote. And this is mainly because if you look at his past, he's been as liberal on social issues as Lisa Murkowski. So much so to the point where the state of Pennsylvania voted for another liberal Republican over him in the primary in Dr. Oz. And when it comes to trade, all those, trade policies that Trump used to his advantage in Pennsylvania, guess what? McCormick is awful on them. He's worse on trade than John Fetterman is on trade. And I'm not putting that lightly. And he's worse than Oz was on the issue. Oz arguably got outflanked on that issue by Fetterman, believe it or not, or whatever. Even if it was very incoherently, he still technically got outflanked. Imagine what McCormick would do. Now, obviously, Mastriano has said he would run, and he's not a good fit either for various reasons. He doesn't know how to campaign. He's well-meaning, but he can't win. In fact, I'd be worried that he'd be a drag on the ticket. But this notion that Dave McCormick's going to go out there and flip Pennsylvania, so much so to the point where it's a higher priority than Arizona, nonsense. And he says he will decide after the Arizona primary to decide whether he wants to spend there. So if they put up somebody that the turtle does not like, guess what? He's going to say, I'm out. And that's wrong. That's very wrong. We saw what happened last time. And it was so bad to the point where they had to shut down campaign offices in the Masters campaign. I'm hearing about this all after the election. It was brutal for the Masters campaign to the point where Blake Masters ended up, losing by 5, but that arguably was a miracle to a large degree, especially because Kelly was a strong incumbent and based off of how a lot of other Republican candidates did against incumbents that year, to the point where, I'm not going to say if he got properly funded, he would have won, but maybe he would have actually gone down by, I don't know, like 2, 3, and he'd be the instant favorite this time around against a much weaker opponent in Gallego. And also going up in a 3-way race where Sinema's going to take some, of these, I guess you would say, McCain-style Republicans, as well as a lot of these disaffected Democrats who are not fully on board with somebody as radical as Gallego is. And it's like, you are not going to spend in Arizona because you're selfish and you don't want somebody like a Masters or a Lake to even have a shot. And Lake's probably going to jump in at this point, whether people like it or not. I've said for the longest time, she's going to have to pick a lane pretty soon, because either you're going to be this, election integrity activist or whatever, or you're going to be a politician that's going to focus on issues that's going to win you Arizona and win over the electorate. And it does seem as if you look at her social media for the past couple weeks, it's been all about issues, the issues that she was talking about in the general election of her gubernatorial bid, more so than her whole lawsuits that haven't exactly gone anywhere. So maybe she's going to throw her hat in the ring. I don't know. Personally, I would prefer Masters, because I know that he can get 46, 47%. His image really hasn't changed much since the election, to the point where I know that he probably would stand a chance. And it doesn't seem like people like Yee or Lesko or Hamadeh or any of those people would run. But if Lake's the nominee, or if Lake goes up against Robson in the primary, Lake is my support 1,000%. There's no way in hell I would ever consider voting for KTR. Obviously, she's literally evil and a horrible fit for any state. Basically, you take Kelly Loeffler and you look at her, and then you make her worse somehow. You get Karen Taylor Robson. This is true. She scams elderly people. She does. And that's been proven. And the most egregious scam of an elderly person that Robson has ever committed in her life has been marrying her husband, who's like 90 years old. And we know that she probably is out there cheating with guys much younger than her husband, but that's beside the point. It's completely irrelevant. But she supports Democrats. She goes out there and endorses these radical left, and I'm not using that term in like the whole, sense that a lot of these politicians use it, but somebody who is a diehard leftist supporting them for city council in Phoenix just because Kari Lake supported somebody else. Spiteful, bitter, loser, has family members working for Hobbs' transition team. This is all public information. Absolutely ridiculous. There's no way in hell that you're going to convince me she's a good candidate. You can say whatever you want about Lake. Don't like the way Lake's handled the post-election fallout. Fine. Cry about it all you want. Doesn't matter. The bottom line is that you look at somebody who supports free tuition or in-state tuition for illegal aliens, all these things, just because she gets, donors that probably sit back and call her up and ask her to support something like that, then boom, there you go. So that kind of shows you the type of politician she is. I'd say that she's practically on par with Sinema. So in a primary, I don't think that, if McConnell's going to view her as a star recruit and put all of his resources on her in the primary, it's going to be an utter disaster. It's going to be an utter disaster for the general if she goes down, especially because he's going to sit back and not fund. He's holding the Senate race hostage. And it's not all his final say, because Daines has a final say, but it's ridiculous. You can't do that. You can't do that. You just can't. And that's what he's doing. He's waiting until the primary. He doesn't want to see anybody like Lake or Masters or anybody thrive in that primary, even though they can win the general. You need 46, 47% in three-way race. Trump's the nominee, probably gets at a minimum, even worst case scenario, loses AZ again, 48% of the vote in the state, maybe even 49%. It'd be close again. It doesn't matter. If he's going to have those coattails, which he has very strong down ballot coattails, yeah, he's going to be able to carry that nominee if they probably do align with his views more than not. So, yeah, ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous from Mitch McConnell. And that's pretty much all we have right here. It's pretty much all we have to it. So we will get into the super chats because I know you guys have a lot of them, and it's very important that we get to them. But you look at what's going on with McConnell, you look at what's going on with the establishment. This is all despite Donald Trump. It's all despite his movement. They want to keep the establishment in power. We can't let that happen. Brandon Fairbanks, let's go, Brandon. Thank you for the super chat. Says, how's the House looking for 2024? It's a toss-up, really. I think that it comes down to a lot of the redistricting that we're seeing. I think if you look at the new maps you're going to be seeing in Ohio, North Carolina, it's a couple of pickups right there. So I don't know. It seems like the House is going to be close again. But who knows? You could have a more favorable generic ballot in 2024 than you had the midterms, the same way you did in 2008. Depends what happens with the economy. Depends where Biden's approval's at. Kevin McCarthy, for some reason, his approval rating has been solid for a major party leader so far, a lot higher than where Paul Ryan's was back in the day, a lot higher than where Pelosi's was for sure, at least in terms of the net approval. So that's a good thing. And honestly, he's done an okay job. I don't think he's done a great job, but he's done a better job than expected, releasing the 1/6 tapes, etc. Hasn't been perfect, but for somebody like that, yeah, he's done a good job. And if you have somebody in there keeping him in check, a better executive as president, then yeah, I mean, I'm not going to say that it's the worst thing in the world that he's speaker. The problem I have right now is McConnell. McConnell's the more egregious problem right now. I didn't support McCarthy's nomination, though the standoff did work and knocked a little bit of sense into him. But McConnell, I don't think a standoff is going to be able to help you in that case. He just needs to go. And he also needs to be replaced by somebody that they don't have to be like a Vance or a Hawley, but they have to be somebody competent and somebody a lot better than McConnell. Somebody a lot stronger and just somebody who wants to win but isn't spiteful and just so entrenched in the establishment to the point where they would rather have a lifelong liberal in Kyrsten Sinema join the Republican ranks and probably vote the same way she does now than have somebody like a Lake or a Masters type end up becoming senator from Arizona, which, by the way, like I said, I'm willing to look at the field. I'm not saying I support Lake for Senate. If Masters jumps in, I'd probably be more inclined to support him if it just comes down to those two, just because I think Masters is less controversial and also further to the right. But at the same time, looking at it, it's like, yeah, I'll take Lake over 75% of people in that race that want to jump in because all those people are just dyed-in-the-wool rhinos and neocons. And we can't have that either. And it's like, yeah, it's going to be an uphill climb regardless of whoever you decide to go out there and put up. And if I see Lake actually, wanting to play to win and is talking about issues that matter, then I'm not going to oppose the notion of her becoming a senator or becoming the nominee. I don't think anybody should at that point. But Nick H says, is it just me or are the Sims becoming more unhinged? By the day they do. I mean, they're the ones claiming that the people that support, Trump are unhinged or they're in a cult or whatever. But they are the ones that tend to be going out there and repeating the same resist lib, neocon, whatever talking points. Oh, Trump is evil. Trump, even some of the people, not all of them, but some of the people are saying Trump's a criminal. Now they look at this case and they're like, Trump is a rapist. So these are the TDS crew. They are no different than the TDS crew we saw during his presidency. Trump has been measured. He's been the chill one recently for the most part. Maybe you could look at some Truth Social rants at 3, 4 a.m., but I mean, besides that, looking at where he's actually talking to the people, making those public appearances, it's been pretty solid, been competent, one could say, which is a word that none of these people would have ever used to describe Trump. And I mean, honestly, at times, Trump's campaign has not been that smooth. It's not always been his fault, but this time around, it seems smoother. But then you have all these people saying he can't win. The polls show him up. You look at why Republicans underperformed in the midterms. We look at the raw data. It wasn't because of him. He points out the problem. He wants to fix the problem, talks about it in all his rallies. These people say Trump opposes the mail-ins and ballot harvesting if we do it. And it's like every single rally, he says it now. And they point to the clip where he talks badly about election month. And it's like, yeah, we shouldn't like election month. Red states should ban these practices. They should ban most forms of voting before debates and things like that, but we're not there yet. So we have to use it to our advantage. That's exactly what Trump says. That's the correct position people should hold and have on the topic. And Trump agrees, but these people throw a temper tantrum every single time Trump opens his mouth because they're the ones that have TDS. Let's see. Venator says, to all the people praising Tucker Carlson, he's not based. He condemned white identity, and his dad is former CIA and a registered foreign agent for Orban. He's very sus. Well, if you're a registered foreign agent, wouldn't you rather be a foreign agent for Viktor Orban, somebody that's actually solid, cares about his country, cares about his people, has strong borders, than you would somebody who's a foreign agent for a lot of other countries? Like, really? I mean, you exactly have to have some give and take. Nobody's going to be 100% perfect. I think a lot of people need to understand. And in terms of Tucker, like condemning like white identity or whatever, Tucker's been the one out there that's condemning anti-white racism on Fox, has put those ideas more so in the Overton window than a lot of people have, to the point where it's like, I don't know if you could sit back here and say he's not based because you want to, pick apart certain things he said, or say his dad is a foreign agent, but he was a foreign agent for like one of the best people that we have as a Western leader. It's like, yeah, not everybody's going to be perfect. I get that. You have to accept that and understand that, but still find a way to work within the system to the point where you're going to be able to change it. I mean, I strive for a day where Tucker Carlson's views are technically seen as like the mainstream center of the right. Like, we're not there yet. So to say, oh, we have to throw him away because he said one thing that was a little bad out of context, or said one thing where he talked about his dad who worked for a foreign government, who worked for, or, that foreign government has close ties to another foreign government. It's like, yeah, you think we don't have close ties to Israel and all of that? It's like, people need to be pragmatic about these things. I hate to say it, but you're not going to have everything perfect the way you want it to be. Like, Tucker's against foreign aid. He's been against the activist groups. He basically told the ADL to go screw themselves on Fox News. And that's not going to be good enough for some people, even though he pushes the Overton window on topics in front of millions. I mean, come on, let's get real here. You don't have to agree, but this notion that, oh, he's not based, like, what's your threshold for base? Probably not a realistic threshold. Anthony Williams says, how can we fix the country if conservative judges don't fight like Democrat judges? It feels like they got us trapped. Well, they don't fight because it's my principle. It's my principle. We don't want to look like the bad guys. We don't want to get called names. We don't want to be called authoritarian fascist. Guess what? They call you that anyways. Just do something. Lift a finger for once and be useful. Because they do it to us, you do it to them. Like, it's plain and simple. There's clear, egregious violations of the law that have been committed by people like the Clintons, by Hunter Biden, by all these people, all these politicians on the establishment left. And there are some in the establishment right. There's definitely some things in the Bush history that should be looked into as well. But they don't go after them. In many cases, they're in bed with them because they serve the same establishment. And that's a problem. They need to be going after these people because the opposition goes after our guys constantly. Our guys who are solid and based and whatever you want to say it. But still, it's like, come on. They don't do it. They need to fight harder. They need to fight back harder against this. That's pretty much it. John Waffle H2 pieces. What if Liz Cheney, a.k.a. Karen, jumps in the race? She'll get 2%. I mean, that's just another part of the sideshow. It's like Hutchinson. It's like, what's he doing out there? He's going to go out there and be as liberal as possible and attack DeSantis and Haley from the left even. And he's going to go out there and get pummeled everywhere. It's going to be brutal. Algebra Instructor says, you Crowder Pool redacted, all of you, before every single live stream is a Biden presidency ad. It's beyond aggravating. Well, let them spend all their resources advertising on right-wing content. Like, if that's what they want to do, if they want to spend all of their resources going out there and advertising on Red Eagle politics videos, I mean, go for it. What do I care? Because what they're going to be doing is just making people on the right more irritated at Biden. Don't get mad at me. If you're getting mad at me, I don't pick the ads. But they're going to get people on the right more irritated at Biden. And those are ads that people on the left or the center are not going to see. And even then, they're probably not going to be big fans of it. So Sam Madsen says, does Rick Scott under or overperform Trump? Under, it's Rick Scott. He's not going to win by one again, especially if he's up against Grant Hill or Dwayne Wade or whoever. but he's more than certainly going to win. Jesse Hughes, his thoughts on the Christian nationalism debate. If that refers to like the forum they had at some university or whatever, I didn't get around to watching that, so I can't comment on that. Nick Ace, his thoughts on George Santos. Again, another example of somebody who is a target of the system. Now, Santos is a dishonest guy, but he's also the most honest man in Washington. And for some reason, he's very solid on every issue so far, which, again, he had a past that was all over the place. But he's had one of the most solid voting records in Congress that I think we have in Congress right now. And that goes with all of his flaws and whatever. And he's probably not going to win re-election, even if he wins a primary, because his district is just too blue. It's a presidential year. But again, they're just trying to take him down. They're trying to take these people down that are relatively anti-establishment. You'll never see them go after one of their own. Very rarely. And it's usually something that's blatant and the person was just dumb and they're already like out of politics, whatever. It's absolutely ridiculous. Sam Madsen says if it's Masters again, though, the Social Security stuff will be a problem. Yeah, I mean, that's true. I know, but still, that was a problem against a very strong incumbent who vastly outspent him, probably a little bit more than he could even be outspent this time. And he still got, 47% of the vote. So it is an issue. But this time around, Masters does seem like the type of guy to learn from his tactical errors. And I don't know how much of a problem it's going to be. I mean, it is somewhat of an issue, but I mean, like that's like, if it's like the single factor, that's like telling, if you tell like a DeSantis supporter, he can't win Arizona because of the Social Security thing, which again, I don't think that would help him. I think it'd be close, but that's probably one of the states where he does have that upper hand because of all those cringe McCain people in the suburbs, whatever. It's like, yeah, but I don't know if it'd be the factor, wouldn't go over very well. But I mean, like I said, his statements were a little out of context, but he's going to have that funding to fight back against that at the end of the day. But definitely it is a factor that's not working out to his advantage in a general, and it probably wasn't the best thing for him to make those comments. Even if there are some benefits technically for privatization here and there, depending on the style of privatization, it just is that third rail you don't touch in politics. It's like defunding the police. You just don't say that if you're a Democrat. And you say it if you're a Dem, you go out there and what happens to you? You get absolutely decimated. So keep that in mind. Matthew Pacheco says at this point, we should pay attention to which candidates McConnell endorses and support the other primary challengers if there's any. Depends on the candidate. I mean, there are some races where like the field is so already cleared to the point where McConnell will throw his support behind the nominee, just like he did with Herschel Walker in the state of Georgia, even though it's very evident that you look at somebody like him and it's like, yeah, he was, not really that, like all that besides like, oh, Trump endorsed him. Because it is true. Herschel Walker on policy, everyone's like, he's a Trump choice. MAGA candidates, whatever, these America First candidates can't win. And it's like, even so, he ran his campaign as a generic Republican and did that from day one and like really didn't mention Trump at all. Herschel Walker's flaws were Herschel Walker's flaws themselves. And yeah, he should not have been recruited in retrospect. Nobody disagrees with that, but still. Jesse Hughes says, didn't know about the forum either. I'm at the general debate about the concept of Christian nationalism online. Well, it's a very hard thing to define. I mean, the bottom line is America is a Christian nation. We're founded largely by Christians and on Christian principles, and I stand by that. Yeah, you do have the First Amendment, whatever. Other religions can exist legally in this country, just as Christians are allowed to exist in some non-Christian countries. But I firmly do believe that America is a Christian nation first and foremost. And I don't think we have to have this separation of church and state as much as some people make it they're out to be one, because it does tend to be a thing that is not really outlined in the Constitution. And you've had liberal hacktivist judges go out there time and time again and change the laws and make prayer in schools illegal. And you have a more secular society now, and it's also a more sick society as well. And what can they say? They're going to point out to like Japan. Oh, well, technically, when the mass shooting problems, the guns, look at Japan. It's like Japan is a more cohesive social structure. And they do have their like paganistic religion or whatever, which is false. Obviously, we condemn that. But still, it's not like they're just a bunch of like woke atheists either. They have their, traditional cultural elements at times. And they do have a lot of degenerate elements of their culture as well. But that's beside the point. That's not exactly something that is really making the case for the Japan model. But like I said, back in the day, you had higher rates of not just like church attendance, but also just religious beliefs as well. Belief in God has dropped significantly. Belief in Christianity has dropped significantly. I don't think that's a good thing at all. I don't think anybody should think it's a good thing at all. Even you'll have some atheists that will say this is not a good thing, even if I disagree, because it's objectively not a good thing. Alex P says, to be honest, I'm all in on Mark Lamb for Arizona Senate. He's pivoted before the election already. For somehow you look at it and it's like, oh, wow, this guy's going out there and he's scrubbed all of his tweets and mentions of 2020 and all this stuff. And he's talking about immigration. I'm open to supporting a lot of people besides Robson. However, when you look into it and you read between the lines there are some things in his past that I've heard of. And I haven't heard the specifics, but I've heard that there are things in his past that might hurt him in like a general election. So we'll wait and see, but I'm open to it. Just really depends on what it is. Nick H's thoughts on DeSimps wanting to primary Ogles and Luna. I think they're insane. And it's like, I'm not going to sit there and try to primary, like even like somebody like Thomas Massey. Like he's, cringe for the DeSantis stuff. A lot of people are cringe for the DeSantis stuff. I'm not going to say we have to primary every single one if they're going to be voting, with us 99% of the time, whatever. However, it's ridiculous because you do see a lot of these people, all they care about is, if you support Trump, you're in a cult. It's if you prioritize loyalty, you're in a cult. And if somebody goes out there and opposes DeSantis or still backs Trump for logical reasons, then they want to go for their heads and primary them. So they're the ones that are in the cult. We know it. Everybody knows it. And it's funny. You have people that get paid off. You look at Steve Cortez. He was supporting Trump a few months ago. And I think his daughter still supports Trump and was taking pretty solid shots on him, at him earlier today on Twitter, which is pretty funny. But it's like he flips on a dime for DeSantis and comes out with an op-ed in Newsweek. Like Newsweek, why are you going to Newsweek in the first place? Like Newsweek is a left-wing source for the most part. And it's like he's going out there saying, oh, enough with the old men. We need DeSantis, this vague stuff. And it's like, you're like one of the populist figures of Trump's movement. You backed him in 2021 for 2024. You backed him even this year, 2023, 4 months ago. But now you're just turning and now you get like a donation or a job at this never back down phantom pack. And then you're going to go out there and endorse DeSantis, who in Congress voted for or voted against a lot of things you support and for a lot for a lot of things that you don't. I don't know if that's the move. And it's weird. It's just sad to see. I mean, I don't really have anything against the guy, but the fact that he's able to go out there and turn on a dime like that just proves, it's a grift. And these are the same people that say the people that still support Trump are grifting, even though the Trump supporters have been the ones that haven't really been wavering from day one. So how exactly would there be grifting when, in terms of the social media game, there is a lot more money to be made in that Republican establishment? It's true. Whether people want to admit it or not, that doesn't mean that you can't be successful as like a MAGA influencer or whatever, or a Trump supporter. But this notion that one is grifting because they support one or the other, there's more grifters in the DeSantis camp. People like even that used to support Trump from 2016 in the primaries. People like Bill Mitchell grifting. People like Jenna Ellis grifting. And then you have Cortez. It's sad to see. It is, because I've liked him a lot over the years, and he said a lot of great, insightful things. But apparently, guess what? He's down the tubes. He's on the other side. It's just sad, especially given who's propping up that candidacy. That's it. And it's like, clearly it's not because he's opposing Trump on certain issues or whatever, genuinely, because he was supporting Trump a few months ago. And then the only thing people can say about that is, well, you're being a hypocrite because if a DeSantis supporter that was prominent became a Trump supporter, you'd be happy. And it's like, yeah, but I'm not going to say that it's because they have integrity, because the DeSantis people are saying that all these people that they were trashing a few months ago coming over to their side prove that they have integrity. Like if somebody like, I don't know, Rufus gets a $10,000 a month consulting job working for the Trump campaign and starts supporting Trump, I'd be like, yeah, I'm not like going to sit back here and say, oh, wow, that's like a real man of integrity right there. Like, no, I'm just going to say, okay, well, at least I'm not going to have as many annoying tweets on my Twitter feed. Like, that's pretty much it. Base Catalyst says, your thoughts on the debt ceiling in Congress. If Republicans play this right, they can make it look bad on Biden for destroying the economy. We'll see what happens. That's what I always say. I mean, we still are waiting for that full downturn. Like technically we've had a recession, then they've changed the definition of the recession. So we're like not in a recession, and they've opened up all of the emergency oil reserves before the midterm. So gas went down and then gas goes up, and then gas kind of, I think, has gone like down over the past couple of weeks, but it's probably going to go back up again. And it's a brutal cycle. It really is. But I think at some point something's got to give. And it possibly will. And it's not going to be a good thing. It's not going to be a good thing if we see this continued economic downturn because of this incompetent administration. So Real Texan Politics, his thoughts on Tom Tiffany for Senate in Wisconsin. I support it. He's solid. He's an overperformer in the past couple cycles. And he's also somebody who's probably like their best congressman, if not one of them. I'm fine with a lot of the people that have been floated for Wisconsin, but like if people are going to come out here and say that, oh, Tom can't win because he's like not from the suburbs or whatever, it's like, give me a break. Like the guy's good optics. He focuses on what matters, and he's still very solid. And candidates like that typically do well. And in many cases, they can outrun Trump by like one in the suburbs, still get the Trump base out because Trump's going to be on the ballot in November. And it's like, yeah, I would be a little bit worried about the driftless area, regardless of whoever we put up, just because of the fact that like you do have to have somebody that can do just as well as Trump there, because those votes do add up. But it does seem like Tiffany's the kind of guy that can go to these suburbs in Milwaukee and still be able to get enough of that, you know, ancestrally Republican support. And by the way, the notion that like Waukesha or Washington are like zooming left off a cliff is not true. Ozaukee is, but you look at like the sub demography of those counties, it's like Republicans have such a high floor in Waukesha. It's ridiculous. Even Tim Michaels got a higher percentage of the vote there than Trump did. And he just got shellacked in the rurals, which proves that it's about turnout. They want to say it's not, but it is about turnout. It's not about the independents, because the suburban independents didn't move left. You just didn't get those, you know, voters that you needed to turn out for you in that Trump base. And as a result, you keep losing. And this is a major problem that's going to exist, and it's going to need to be addressed because Trump's not going to be around forever. And he's not. Let's see. FM 32047 says, hey, Rep, just joined and saw the McConnell news there. Still assessing Wisconsin and Nevada as the problem, considering Tom Tiffany can beat Baldwin and maybe Rick Harrison or Jim Marchant for Nevada. Also, McCormick is DOA against Casey. Yeah, Lake has a much better shot at Arizona in a three-way race than McCormick has against Bob Casey. If you say otherwise, you're just lying to yourself. Obviously, it does matter about what percentage of the vote that Sinema is going to get. I understand that, but still, it's like, no. This notion that, oh, it's Jover from the start. No, it's Jover from the start for McCormick. It's McCover for McCormick. And if he goes out there, he probably loses by 5. Honestly, because he's such a bad fit for the state of Pennsylvania. He's from Connecticut. You know, Oz was from New Jersey. This time, Connecticut, and Casey's a lot more mentally fit and popular than somebody like Fetterman. And obviously, Trump boosting that turnout is going to help the Republicans, no matter who the nominee is. No, I don't support Mastriano either, but McCormick is not good. Run Garrity. Garrity is somebody who might actually stand an outside chance because she already outperformed Trump and won in a massive upset in 2020. Why not put her up? And she's good on the issues too. And a statewide official who's won statewide. Like, they don't want to do that. They want to run some unproven outsider who's a carpetbagger and a liberal on a lot of social issues, even more liberal than Murkowski, and a horrible fit for the state of Pennsylvania. You're better off running Toomey again. I'd probably rather put Toomey up there than McCormick, because McCormick would have also voted to impeach. So what difference does it make at the end of the day? Makes zero difference. Matthew Pachechos' thoughts on Bob Good supporting DeSantis 2024. I mean, again, like, you have a couple solid people that are making bad decisions. Okay. I mean, a lot of these solid people in Congress are endorsing Trump. Then they will say, oh, well, no, Trump is the establishment because he has endorsements from Congress, which is not how it works, because a lot of the people, 90% of the people endorsing Trump are your rock solid representatives, your Andy Biggs, your Paul Gosars, your Andy Ogles. Now that came out of left field. He was supposed to endorse DeSantis, didn't happen. Your MTGs, your, you name it, go down the list. Look at everybody. Gates, you know, people like Corey Mills, even Floridians, Florida congressmen in droves coming out to endorse Donald Trump over on DeSantis. That honestly kind of on the surface level would seem like he's DOA in a primary, which he is. Nick H says Rufus seems to be slowly accepting reality that DeSantis has no chance. Yeah. And if your candidate loses a primary, what do? You rally behind the nominee. That's what you do. And he's going to lose the primary. Let him jump in and make a fool out of himself. If he does that, his 2028 chances are zero. They are nil. It's like, imagine putting Ted Cruz up now. And it's like DeSantis, a lot of people haven't heard him speak. He is not charismatic. He is not charming in any way, shape, or form. And it's like, whatever you say about Trump, or he's divisive in terms of his personality, DeSantis is largely uninspiring. You can win a gubernatorial election in a midterm year with low turnout with a competent party apparatus by 30, by 40, by 50. It's not going to translate to a presidential victory where the choice is on display 24/7 and it's a binary choice. Anybody who disagrees is having the logic of like a 14-year-old on the electoral side of Twitter. That's how it works. And that's not saying Trump's guaranteed a victory. I'm just saying this notion that DeSantis is far better or far more electable, nowhere to be found. And Trump's 2020 campaign had a lot of flaws, still was with razor thin margin of loss, razor thin. And this time around, what do you see? You see him running a much more competent campaign in terms of messaging from what we see in his policy videos. He's not pandering. Watch his speeches, watch his rallies, watch his CPAC attendance speeches, whatever you want to call them. He's doing a very good job so far. He needs to stay down that path. Just same messaging from now to the election. Maybe you could, cut around the edges here and there at times if there's some issues or some things where it's like, oh, that's, a little cringe, whatever. But by and large, he's rock solid compared to where he was before. And he seems to have learned from a lot of his mistakes, which again, if people, and he's gone out there and said, we hired a lot of people that were a part of the swamp. We're not going to do that again. The DeSantis people hated that. But that's what you wanted to see. You wanted to see him admit his flaws. And then it's like, okay, whatever. And it's like the whole COVID thing. I get it. Trump and DeSantis on COVID were both not ideal, first of all. Second of all, when it came to the issue of COVID, it's not a big issue anymore for a lot of people. It may be for some people. I'm not saying that it doesn't matter, but I will say that, what percentage of people view it as a top issue now? Probably like 1. Foreign policy, World War III being on the verge, immigration, inflation, the economy. Abortion is a big issue for Dems, obviously. It's like, yeah, this is a problem. Major problem. Benson X says, though Ozaki is moving left quickly, it is the smallest of the 3 WOW counties. As long as we hold steady in Waukesha and Washington, we'll be fine. Exactly. And you are gaining still in the driftless area. Make no mistake about it, you are gaining. And they say they don't add up, but you're not really going to lose a lot in the WOW counties. Trump might do better in them. At least Waukesha and Washington. Washington, I'd say definitely. I believe that even it was either like a negligible difference, or Michaels even did better in Washington. He ran a god-awful campaign. He's just like a brick out there. Didn't do anything, just sat there, wasn't notable. And I feel like that's how DeSantis is going to be perceived in the state of Wisconsin as well. Doesn't matter how awful your opponent is. Alex Peace's thoughts on Zach Nunn. He's a guy I'm excited about. Hopefully he holds his seat. I think he should be able to. Sam Madsen said also about Waukesha, even Kelly only did 4% worse than Trump there while doing over 10% worse statewide. Yeah. I mean, like in Kelly ran in an election that was so bad. It was so awful. And his campaign was awful. And everybody just acted like he had no chance, which should never be your mindset. This I don't have a chance mindset. That's going to doom us more than the overconfidence mindset. You know, you can't be a doomer. You have to be realistic, but you can't be a doomer. You can never be a doomer. And so many people were like, oh, well, I'm going to, my preferred candidate who had like zero policy differences from Kelly lost the primary, so I'm just not going to vote. Like, really? Who are these people? Like, why would anybody have this mindset to begin with? Do people really think Jennifer Doro would have won? He lost by 10. Like, she probably would have lost by a similar margin, maybe by less, but whatever. Like, this notion that she was such a good candidate because she happened to like be a woman or whatever doesn't add up. It's like she still had a similar past when it came to the issue of abortion. They were going to be fired up on that anyways. And you don't go on offense on abortion. That's the problem. They never go on offense. Republicans used to before the Dobbs decision. They were on offense. Abortion was our issue. It benefited us. And then boom, what happened? It's like, of course, they're going to be fired up on it. But we're ceding ground. We're ceding the culture on it too. And it's like, it can't happen whatsoever. It can't. I'm not saying you propose all these national bans either. You got to get them in place at some point. But, you know, you have to spin the issue in a way that's going to benefit you, not just, you know, lie down and just go to sleep on the issue while the opposition's out there throwing a party. You can't do that. Nick H says Brad Parscale's an underrated. Oh, yeah. A lot of reasons. And the same, like, there's a lot of reasons for the midterms. Like, every single candidate besides maybe like Mastriano that was nominated by the Republicans in 2022 should have been able to win if the party did their job. That's what I will say. And even when it came to Mastriano, he was winning that primary regardless if Trump endorsed him or not. That's the only reason why Trump endorsed him in the first place, is because of the fact that Trump would only have endorsed somebody who would have won that primary. He would have endorsed Barletta. Barletta would have lost the primary. Be another Mo Brooks situation where even if he endorsed him early, Barletta's lazy. He would not have won the primary. So it's like, yeah. All right. Last call for super chats. We'll go for a few more minutes, and then I think it's time to sort of end the stream. But it's true. You have a problem as a party. You have a problem as essentially a movement. If you're not going to be able to effectively just man the room, and when it comes to whatever issue that's proposed to talk about by whoever, you have to go out there and you have to dominate them on that issue one way or another. And Trump is somebody that I think can. You should have seen DeSantis's look on his face when he was in the debate with Charlie Crist, when he was like being pressed if he would run for president in 2024. He just didn't answer. He was like, I'm out of time, or he's out of time. It's like, really? Like, it's a good thing a lot of people didn't watch that debate for him, honestly. I think a lot of people should in the primary, because it's like, yeah, he's not somebody who's that strong. And if you want somebody who's going to be like, who's going to make Biden look, you know, quirky and charming and charismatic, then you put up Ron. I mean, like, honestly, because he does have that effect. He will make Biden seem palatable to a lot of people, especially when they hear about, you know, whatever remedial nonsense Biden did about, oh, we're going to preserve this job that he's going to talk about nonstop, while simultaneously attacking DeSantis on the issue of trade. That's not going to go over well in Pennsylvania. DOA in Pennsylvania, possibly DOA in Wisconsin. I will say he's not favored. Now, I will say that Trump might not be favored in Arizona, but that doesn't mean he can't win it. And he still has a high floor there, even if his ceiling is lower. So he can go out there, get 48% carry or whoever, no pun intended, to a Senate victory there if he's like tied to that person, because the Trump aligned candidates do better when Trump's on the ballot. When Trump's not on the ballot, they technically don't, they really don't do that well. And you saw that in a lot of these races in 2019, 2018, 2017. It's true. LF Fun says, do you think Dems will try to run Bashir in 2028 if he wins re-election this year in Kentucky, or even for the 26th Senate race? I mean, he'll probably be a contender, but I mean, he'll be attacked on all cylinders. I mean, he's on their bench though, for sure. Sam Madsen said, we have a high floor in the Grand Rapids area too. Even Dixon ran in line with Trump. Yeah, and I don't think Trump's going to get shellacked in Michigan because of that fact either. I mean, like, to say that Dixon failed because she was a bad fit for the suburbs or whatever, it's like Dixon didn't do that well in the suburbs. She like lost ground in Oakland and Kent and whatever other county, but she lost far more ground in Macomb County, in these rural counties who haven't always voted solidly Republican. Like, those are the counties that she lost ground in, which I think the midterms kind of really just shows that it's not always about trends or this electoral phenomena or whatever. It's about a lot of different things, but it's also mainly about turnout and who goes out there and who plays to win and who plays to lose. And even though Dixon was outspent, if you have a turnout operation that's effective and competent, then it doesn't exactly matter nearly as much. So Matthew Pacheco says, how screwed are we in Arizona in 2024? I would say that we are not favored. I don't even think somebody like DeSantis is guaranteed to win it. I think that it's going to be probably going for, I'd say 60-40, a Democrat state. The state's changed since then. I mean, you could say whatever you want about, they chose Hobbs over Lake, and they also chose in-state tuition for illegal aliens. They chose a lot of these. They've rejected voter ID on that same ballot. So there's a lot of either the ballot campaigns were conducted very poorly, or you look at it and it's just like, okay, well, we need to change something. And it is a ticket splitting state. That is true. That's why you saw Kimberly Yee do so well, even though her opponent was essentially a sacrificial lamb who didn't try and was very far left, whatever. So it's just like, whatever, guys. I mean, this is a problem that we have. And there's so much infighting that's pointless, and this movement that doesn't actually move the needle. And it always comes from the opposing side, because if they just listen to what I had to say, then we'd win everything. But they don't listen to what I have to say or what people like me have to say. And it's a problem. And technically they could say, well, what about the midterms? Well, if we listened to them, we probably would have gotten shellacked by even more. Like, the problem is that the messaging was not that good. The GOP has a branding problem. And this is an issue that's gone all the way back to 2020. I mean, 2016, we were better off in terms of our messaging. But ever since then, it seems like the tides have kind of shifted. And instead of like building on that initial Trump win, we've just ceded ground and talk about issues that don't matter to most people. So Nick H says, I'm really having a hard time seeing how Trump wins Pennsylvania. Well, it's pretty easy. Look at the 2020 map. I mean, you look at that. Did Biden even crack 50% in the state? If he did, he barely did. I mean, that's very telling in and of itself. You're telling me Biden hasn't lost support in Pennsylvania? I mean, midterm years in Pennsylvania, say what you will about them, but look what happened in 2014 in Pennsylvania. Republicans got completely shellacked. Granted, you had a bad gubernatorial candidate, just like you had one this time that was very weak. But what we do know is that Biden barely got by, got 50% of the vote. And he had a home field advantage going. He did much better than Hillary Clinton in northeastern Pennsylvania. If that shifts and Republicans, get those rural voters out, they ballot harvest, they early vote, which they've talked about doing that in the state party. They get those voters out there. Then it's like, yeah, I do believe that you will see Biden have a shot at going down. But those voters, typically in Pennsylvania, that white working class voter base, they like Trump. They didn't come out for Oz. They didn't come out for even Mastriano. They didn't come out for anybody in their lives. except Trump. You'd have to go all the way back to Ronald Reagan to get those margins. And even then he underperformed in a lot of counties compared to Trump in the rural areas. So it's like, yeah, you'll have to maximize your white working class support, but Trump has that solid trade policy. Trump has that, solid worldview when it comes down to it that is shared for the American dream that a lot of those people do. I mean, you drive through Pennsylvania, rural Pennsylvania. It's like going through, it honestly feels like West Virginia. It feels like the South. They call it Pennsyltucky for a reason. And it's like, yeah, you have a problem in those suburbs there. But even then, the problem with Oz's underperformance, he got in line in the Philly suburbs. It was the white working class turnout, and he didn't get enough support with them, and that ended up sinking him at the end of the day. So obviously, it's a lot of things. And Shapiro outspending Mastriano 50-1 definitely hurt Oz to a certain extent. I don't think that was the only reason for him losing. I think that if they ran in line, or if Mastriano, had a respectable performance, or a Barletta, whatever Barletta would have got, assuming he was like properly funded, whatever, Oz probably would have still lost by a couple of points. But I mean, that's just what happens. Oz wasn't that inspiring for a lot of people, and it showed. So Sam Madsen said, would Ron lose Mower County, Minnesota? Mower County, Minnesota. Let's check that, because that's a county I've never heard of, so it must be small. That's by Rochester, and that voted for Trump by 6. It voted for him by 8 in 2016 with a higher third party share. It voted heavily for Barack Obama, heavily for Kerry, heavily for Gore in 2000. So it's like, yeah, this is a potential place where you would see a potential DeSantis underperformance. Even if he doesn't lose the county, he may not be winning the county by really enough to make a difference. And that's a problem when we look into it. Those counties where you look at the turnout in some of these elections, and it's like, yeah, Republicans might be doing, in terms of the suburbs, 1 point worse with Trump. But if you're doing far worse in a lot of these other counties without him, that 1 point gain in the suburbs is not really going to make a difference. Even when Youngkin won in Virginia, the biggest red shifts he saw were in like Southern Virginia, where Trump won by a lot because he touched base on issues that really mattered and had a competent operation that actively went out there and got out the vote. And this is something that is not really talked about enough, but it is what it is. Now, Scott Jensen won that county, but he only won it by 3. That's an underperformance. And those underperformances add up. And I'm sure when it comes to some of those down ballot races, like the Secretary of State race, you did see it potentially flip. So, I mean, they do add up, these areas. And it's not just rural versus suburban, because that's something that they use as a straw man, because there's a lot of white working class voters who do live in the suburbs, especially in the Midwest. Macomb County, a lot of counties east of Cleveland that move right in 2020, you name it. So, all right, guys, we're going to end the stream. Thanks for tuning in. Like the stream down below, subscribe, hit the bell. I'll see you guys in a video tomorrow. We'll do another stream on Thursday. So as always, guys, thanks for watching. Red Eagle out.